Okay, everybody. I want to apologize again about today. Obviously, I don't run the IT department, and I don't control the weather. So we had the outages that occurred from the storms earlier in the week, and they were still occurring this afternoon. Phone went down for a while, internet went down, then came back up, et cetera. So I'm hoping, and it appears to me at this point, that everything is back online. Of course, that didn't help us any. That's why I had to go ahead and cancel the class at 2 o'clock. But that doesn't mean that we weren't able to recover. One of the great things about technology is, although it's vulnerable and it's fragile, it's resilient. And one of the ways I'm showing you that, especially with management information systems, is that tonight I'm back here now. The system is back up and restored. And we could add some additional insight on your responses to the case follow-up and the management decision problems that are due, as well as the Loudon, the exam over Chapter 1 in Loudon. And I want to try to put those into some perspective. Case follow-up number 1 is something I thought quite interesting, and that is that question about are farms becoming digital firms. And I shared some experiences, and one of your colleagues who has worked in agriculture has shared his experiences with me. And indeed, information technology, MIS, management information systems, are a key and essential element of helping those who make food be able to handle the problems like what we saw today. When the system went down at school, it's really not much different than if you have a drought or you're about to harvest wheat, 100,000 acres of wheat, and suddenly you get too much rain or hailstorms, things of that nature. So I wanted to amplify some of what I know as I look will be some excellent responses. And I want to talk with you very briefly about that. Typically what I do is I look to see if the basic elements are there for your response. And I use the class times as an opportunity to provide some talking points from that particular chapter that relate to the case follow-ups that you've done. The management decision problems, I'm always interested in why a particular decision problem was chosen, why it seemed to attract the most attention. Since we haven't had that opportunity now this week, I want to have this session, which is in lieu of our regular class session we have had this afternoon, by taking a look at looking one more time at a key part or section of that chapter in the Loudon text. And so we're going to go over there for a moment. One of the great things about, again, information systems is the ways that they can help us connect and communicate, but also one of the ways that they can help us share knowledge in ways that we could not have. And if you would have told me when I was a student your age that I'd be able to open up a computer that I carried around, or a phone, or a thing we call a tablet, and look at a textbook. Some of you may be even looking at this and doing this from hundreds, maybe 1,000 miles away. I don't know. I would have thought that was just something of science fiction, of a dream. You know, we've had distance learning like we're doing here for a long time. The development of radio was one of the first ways that we used an information system, a broadcasting system, to teach. Australia, which has such immense distances, and Africa, in which there at the time was very little infrastructure. Those were two places where we pioneered distance learning, for example, in using radio and radio programming as a means to communicate content to people, courses, and often they would hear a broadcast and might have a textbook and would be then respond to that broadcast, and so it almost became like really the first distance learning was correspondence courses, where people took a course by the mail. They took a course, they got the textbook or textbooks for the course, they responded in written form in their assignments, they sent them in, those assignments were graded, and many institutions would ask those students to come in and take an exam to verify that it was indeed that person. Well, I don't want to get too far afield with that, but basically here we want to talk for a moment just about the dimensions of information systems. And today, when we had this hiccup in our system, there was things that happened along the different dimensions of that information system that were impacted. And first, to start with senior management, I'm certain that the folks over in the senior management at the school were alerted about what was happening. And then, of course, that came down to the folks who were over in IT and the people who run that operation over into the academic areas. I let the dean's office know, for example. And then finally, I'm down here with one of the production service workers, and those folks, along with them, to make sure that we got things up and running the best we could. We went in the lab and we only had about a third of the computers that were up, and then they all went down. But these are levels in a firm in terms of the information, the dimensions of information. This fits quite well with the level of responsibility or the time horizons, or both, that we associate with strategic planning or business policy or strategic management. And so we have senior management, middle management. Now, one of the interesting things that's occurred is that senior management really is, those folks are starting to disappear. You're going to hear folks talk about organizations being flattened, okay? And what's happening is that in terms of cost cutting, this level of management is being eliminated. And because they are, the level of responsibility and communication between senior people, okay, and between folks at the operational level has been increased. And more companies want you thinking like a senior manager or thinking like an owner. And with technology, the span of control, that is the number of people who report in to any one person, let's say here's the manager, okay, and then we'll have that span of control. That number of people has increased dramatically as we've eliminated middle management. Now, there are still large behemoth corporations where you have structures that are very similar to this pyramid, simply because of the sheer size or the complexity of the operations, or both. But more and more, we're seeing this middle level being eliminated. So as we look at these dimensions, I would say that in time, that what will be important will be not the dimensions what will be important will not be, the dimensions are going to be inverted more and more, where the people who are out in the actual operations think, act, and behave like the company owners. A good example of this is going to be, already is emerging in terms of dealing with customer service problems. It used to be that if there was a customer service problem, someone would, at the operational level, would initiate some type of a complaint that came from the consumer or the end user, or the customer or the client, and that would go up to middle management and finally up to senior management. And if enough of those were collected, then the company would take action to try to deal with that problem. Otherwise, the folks down here at the operational level, okay, would be empowered to work with short-term kinds of things. Well, if the food is cold, we'll give them a coupon or refund their money. But don't think about why the food was cold. Was it the equipment? Was it the lack of training of the folks who were the chefs? Was it simply that our stores, our operations are too small and we can't handle the volume, and so we have people in a waiting line and that queue. Remember, when you go order food, for example, at a restaurant, you're in a queue. That's a line. Well, at the same time, your order is in a queue in the back where it's being prepared. So that's one of those pieces of the dimensions of the information. We look at that at the organizational level, okay? And then we can look at it at the management level, okay? And as we look at that, it starts to become a question of the leadership that's exercised versus the technical background of the folks who are in decision-making capacities. And one of the reasons that I think that these courses that you take, these BISS courses, are so invaluable is that they help you understand that the magic of technology is really not magic. It looks like magic when underneath is a tremendous amount of hard work. I'm going to go out for a minute, and I want to show you something. I'm going to go out on the web for a second. I want to show you something that I think is very, very quite interesting. And I've seen it advertised, and maybe you've actually seen it in operation. It's this thing called Carvana, okay? And as they were talking about, this is a new way to buy a car. Now, this is a perfect example of how somebody said, purchasing a car, we're not a car dealer. We're an information dealer. And of course, today, anybody that you go and search for cars, they're going to have a picture of the car. They're going to have information. If they have a really well-run site, they'll have somebody there who's actually or a chat agent who will say, do you have any questions? And as you look here, this is the new way to buy a car. And basically what they said is, we're going to make car buying just like Amazon makes searching for towels or shoes or anything. We're going to eliminate the middle level as much as possible and let the consumer purchase, and we're going to create a recommendation engine. And that's an important thing. That's a tool or an approach that Amazon uses, where as you search, the system responds to your search. If you want to see a really good example of it that you're very familiar with, but maybe never really thought about it, if you have a music service, for example, like Spotify. Now, I pay for the premium version because I want to choose the songs I want to hear. But you can get a free version of Spotify where you listen to songs and then they'll recommend 4 others that they think are like it. And what's happening is that you're populating a database, and then not only are you populating a database, but by the same time, when Spotify gets your registration and they get some data about you, then they can start to build a profile. And as you can see, what happens, and I'll just quickly annotate this. There's 2 things that are going on here, okay? One is where let me go back here for a second. I'll get that, erase that. We'll go back here, and I want to draw this. Okay. Get that eraser off. I don't want to draw it. Here we go. We've got two things going on. Okay. That's not what I want. And let me see here. I just want a freestyle draw. Still exploring this just like everybody else is. Yeah. Do the arrow. I'll go to the eraser over here for a second. And let's see here. This should do it for me. Okay. And let's do this. Now, here is this first box, and I'm going to call this box number 1. This is all the profile data that Carvana, Amazon, anybody gathers on you. Your age, your income, where you live, your zip code, all of that. So that's one piece of this puzzle or box. And the second, okay, are your choices. As you go to Carvana, for example, or you come over here and you come and you study, you search for a car. Then a third piece of this that starts to emerge, and that is what we call machine learning or artificial intelligence that takes that search and connects it up that generates a feedback loop, if you will, that helps that company augment even better searches on your part, resulting in sales. I don't know how else to explain it, but that's one of those dimensions. So this Carvana is really what we call a recommendation engine, where they recommend things to you, or what you do is you populate, or you get that engine revved up by your searches and your choices. This is different from for those of you who are marketing students, this is the golden age of marketing, because when people click on a link for a particular type of car at Carvana, they're not saying, hey, they're not getting a survey from you that they return in the mail that says, hey, I'm interested in this type of car. They're showing you by their actions, the deeper they go into a link, the more they look at the car, they look at its features, they maybe go in and maybe have a financing tool, that type of thing. The higher the probability they're going to buy that car. Or at the very least, they're going to schedule a test drive of that car. Now, many times, the next piece of this is going to be the virtual test drive, where you'll hit an icon, and up on your phone or up on your laptop or up on your tablet or up on the tower, you've got the big screen, you will be in the driver's seat, or you might be in the passenger seat, or you might be in the back, but you're going to go for a ride. And you're going to see that car, and you're going to see its features and functions. It's not that far-fetched, it's going to happen. So here they are, and they actually, and to top it all off, they deliver the car to your home. Why is that important? Hey, it is part of the buy-in. They've brought the car to your house. Now, you can return the thing if you don't like it. But if you've done all the homework and the research, etc., the odds of you returning that car are very low, and the odds that you'll repurchase using this method are very high. So this, and what we have to try to do in this course, and one of the great challenges for you, will be to try to make that connection between these concepts in the course, okay, versus the actual practical operation. And when we talk about eliminating middle management, we're also talking about trying to eliminate the proverbial middleman, so that I'm the manufacturer, I sell directly to you. If I manufacture automobiles, I want you to come into my website and build a model and buy it. Why? Simple. I don't have to do a whole lot of forecasting. If people get to the point where they say, well, I'm going to buy a car in 6 months, or I want to buy a car, and you build the car, and you literally decide all of the specs, etc. And then before you can see the whole thing, you have to maybe put down a deposit, something of that nature. Well, I don't want to get too far afield with that, but I'll use my eraser here, but you can see how we use that approach to get rid of the middleman and to bring together buyers and sellers. That is, to eliminate intermediaries, or let the technology serve as an intermediary for us. And you could see here you are, they're recommending these different types of cars. So I wanted to go out and visit with you about that. Now, finally, we have to this issue of information technology. And we've talked about this before. Information technology consists of some components or some elements, computer hardware, okay, the physical stuff we have to have, cables and routers and servers and computers and screens and chips, etc. Then we have the software. That's the stuff that runs the hardware. And as they give us, they're going to spend some time in Chapter 5 talking about that. And then data management technology. How do we govern the organization's data, and how do we store it? And how do we retrieve it? And how do we present it? And then networking and telecommunications technology. My late brother-in-law, whose funeral I attended this past weekend back in Phoenix, Chris worked for AT&T, and his unit was part of the folks who oversaw the telecommunications and networking technology. They monitored network operations, and so my sister found one of his old training manuals where they taught, and you don't even remember this, but training manuals said, the highest number of calls are on Mother's Day, and how to make sure the network's up and ready in your section of the country to absorb all that volume of calls. And in the old days, because the networks were all completely physical, if you didn't call your mom way early on Mother's Day or way late at night, you'd get a busy signal because the system would be overloaded. Well, today with virtual networks, we don't have to worry about that. We just create some software. We take the software we have to create a VPN. We create a VPN, and then we direct calls to it. So that's a piece of that. Those are the components of the information technology. And of course, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the internet. Now, I want to say this. Yeah, the authors do a good job of making sure that you understand the internet is the physical apparatus that underlies the World Wide Web, the web. The web is a collection of web pages in all kinds of different formats that are connected through links or hypertext markup language, is what we call HTML. And the authors talk about those components. They talk about internets, intranets, and so on. So that's an important piece there in terms of that information technology. A key part here is this section where the authors say, talk about the fact that it's a business perspective on information systems. They show you this example, okay, of a UPS driver using this information acquisition device. And this way they get and when you get a package delivered to your house or wherever you're at, and you're there, they have you sign. Once you sign, the order's complete and it's verified that yes, indeed, you got the order. Okay? And that 20 years ago, this would have been considered science fiction, a fantastical thing. But if you think about this for a moment, think about the fact that you interact with ATMs where you press a button to show your signature, or maybe you use a stylus to sign, and this is basically an application of automated technology, automated teller machinery, an ATM. It's just an application of it that speeds up the transaction. But this is used for verification, for proof that delivery was made. So as you see here, again, the Loudon textbook does a fantastic job of walking us through this whole system in which we have different information or MIS, management information systems activities that feed into business processes and that are overseen in terms of management activities that increase firm profitability and strategic position. In other words, business value. So when we talk about management information systems, MIS, we're always talking about what's the business proposition, what's the value proposition, how does this create sustainability for my company, how does this build wealth for my company, and thus create wealth and sustainability for those who've invested in it. And so, again, it's a perspective. Now, I think I'm going to spoken about this before, but I just think it's just so interesting because we talk about IT capital stock versus productivity. And we have this thing at times called this productivity paradox, where we say we have all this technology, but we don't seem to be as productive. And I'm going to just offer up my own little kind of theory about that. My belief is that often what happens is that information technology is a two-edged sword. Let's talk about email for a moment. Email is an absolute godsend. I don't have to mail stuff and hope it gets there in a week. I can take documents, I can sign them, write on them, etc. I can scan them, attach them to an email, and send them. I can send an email to somebody across the country. They'll get it within seconds. They can respond, and within minutes, we know what's going on in terms of a particular situation communicated. By the same token, it's a curse because your inbox can be filled with tremendous amounts of email that's not really all that important to your daily life or really all that important to your work. Now, table 1.2 here talks about this use of complementary social media and organizational, social, managerial, and organizational assets to optimize the returns from information technology investments. So it's a blend of these things that have to happen. And you have to have a company that says, okay, how can we establish a greater level of intimacy with our customer? And that is greater level of contact, meaningful contact. How can we do a better job of monitoring the external environment? How can we do a better job of monitoring employee performance? Well, this key piece of chapter 1 and this table really does put into a nice graphic form these elements that have to be tied all together for us to effectively use information technology. I would say that it's important to understand that information technology, this is just not simply a matter of I give everybody a computer and go away. It's what type of computer do I give them? Do I give them a computer at all? Do I give them laptops? Do I give them phones? What's the implication of that? Am I going to allow them to take it and go outside of our network? Will we have just a closed, what we call walled garden, where their machine only really works inside of our intranet? What kinds of software will be loaded? And why do they have to have that loaded? Now, you'll notice if you've gone in the labs today, and this is one of this is again part of this two-edged sword. Today was a real case study in information technology. You were all expecting to watch a live streamcast. And those of you who were going to be there in the lab expected to come, log in, go to VMware, and have those information tools there, Access, Excel, etc. And you were prepared for me to go through the lecture, go through our case discussions. Then as I would record all of that, and then I'd take it and I'd post it on the internet. So you see, there was a lot happening there. But when the system went down, then there was a point of people being in the lab, because if they couldn't get to the internet, they couldn't get to the cloud software. And if they couldn't get to the internet, they couldn't log into Canvas and come in to Canvas and be there and follow me as I went through this lecture. So you have to think about, how do we blend all of that together? Well, again, we're always thinking, this course is saying, okay, there are times I want to look in a very I have a microscope. I look at a very detailed kind of transaction. For example, one like this where someone's signing a stylus saying, yes, I got the package. To big questions like this one. And that's looking through the telescope. The big picture. So the course can be a little frustrating because it's just the answer. There are some answers that are cut and dried, if you will. But all of this is about using this technology not only to make sure that it works properly, but to make sure that it works well, that it has a positive impact, that it builds a virtuous cycle of events that promote sustainability and profitability. Well, thank you again. And my apologies about the system failure that we had today. And we didn't have a complete failure, but we had enough outage that there was really no use you being in the lab. But hopefully, when we're back next week, that will all be done and be recovered. I hope you have a great holiday weekend. If you're traveling, please be safe. I look forward to seeing you next week. God bless you. Have a great and blessed Labor Day weekend.